Chosen one, this winter solstice is not an ending disguised as darkness. It is a quiet beginning that only reveals itself if you don't rush past the doorway. There is something almost tender about today. The year exhales. The light pulls back, not to punish you, but to make space. Space for a reset that doesn't announce itself with fireworks or certainty. Space for a new beginning that starts so softly most people miss it. And that's why today matters. Because the mistake isn't doing something wrong on the outside. The mistake is assuming nothing new can begin while things still feel unresolved inside you. This day asks for a different posture. Not force, not urgency, just willingness. Stay with this message until the end, because what today is really about doesn't land all at once. It settles. And when you feel it, I want you to write your warmest wishes in the comments and end them with Amen. Not as a performance, but as a signal of readiness, because sincere intention, spoken during a threshold moment, carries a strange kind of momentum that doesn't fade quickly. The biggest thing to avoid today is assuming you must feel ready before something new can begin. Readiness is overrated. Most beginnings don't arrive with confidence. They arrive with uncertainty, with mixed emotions, with that quiet sense of, I don't know, but something is shifting. The solstice doesn't ask you to be certain. It asks you to be open. Many people close themselves off today because they're tired of hoping. They tell themselves they'll reopen later when life proves itself. But beginnings don't respond to conditions. They respond to openness. A new beginning doesn't mean erasing the year behind you. It means you stop dragging it forward. That's a subtle difference, but it changes everything. You don't have to forgive everything today. You don't have to understand everything today. You just have to stop defining yourself by what didn't work. The solstice is a line in the sand, not dramatic, just firm. From here on, you don't need to keep reintroducing yourself through old disappointments. Another mistake is thinking new beginnings require dramatic action. Quitting, announcing, burning bridges, reinventing yourself overnight. That's noise. Today is quieter than that. Today favors internal shifts, a softened stance, a release of one old assumption, a small inner decision like, I don't need to carry this the same way anymore. That counts. That matters. That's how real beginnings start, invisibly. Be careful not to confuse rest with stagnation. Today may slow you down, but slowing down doesn't mean you're stuck. It means something is reorganizing. Think of it like recalibration, systems adjusting, muscles unclenching. The mistake is panicking in the pause. The pause is where alignment returns. If you try to push through it, you carry misalignment into the next phase. If you allow it, you enter lighter than you expect. There's also a temptation today to look backward too long, to replay conversations, losses, missed chances. Reflection is healthy. Rumination is not. New beginnings don't require you to extract every lesson immediately. Some lessons ripen later. Trust that what needed to be learned has already landed in your body, even if your mind hasn't organized it yet. Today is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to a truer version of yourself. One that isn't bracing all the time. One that isn't constantly proving or defending. One that remembers that life moves in cycles, not straight lines. Darkness isn't a failure of light. It's part of the rhythm. Avoid making declarations out of exhaustion. Avoid deciding, this is just how it is now. Fatigue lies. The solstice amplifies tired thoughts and makes them sound final. They're not. Let today pass, without turning temporary feelings into permanent conclusions. If all you do today is soften instead of harden, you've honored the beginning that's quietly forming. If all you do is stay open 1 inch wider than you were yesterday, that's enough. Beginnings don't ask for perfection. They ask for permission. There's a strange pressure people feel after a solstice, like something should immediately look different, like you should wake up tomorrow with clarity, motivation, answers. And when that doesn't happen, doubt creeps in. You start wondering if you missed something, if you did it wrong. But that expectation itself is another quiet mistake. New cycles don't announce themselves with certainty. They arrive subtly, almost shy. They test whether you'll keep listening even when nothing obvious is happening yet. Right now, what matters most is what you don't rush to fill. The empty spaces, the unanswered questions, the slight feeling of not knowing where things are going next. Many people are uncomfortable here. They mistake uncertainty for danger, so they rush to label things. They say, "This isn't working," or "This is a dead end," or "I'm behind." But uncertainty is not a verdict. It's a field, and fields are where things grow. One of the most damaging things you can do during this transition is speak harshly to yourself in moments of quiet. The inner commentary matters more than usual right now. Thoughts have a way of sinking deeper when the world is still. Pay attention to how you narrate your life today. Are you speaking to yourself like someone who is allowed to begin again, or like someone who's already been sentenced by their past? You don't need to correct every negative thought. That becomes another form of control. Just don't believe them too quickly. Let them pass without agreement. Let them be weather, not prophecy. Some thoughts only exist because you're tired. Some emotions only surface because the noise dropped low enough for them to be heard. That doesn't make them instructions. This is also not a time to measure progress, invisible outcomes. The solstice works underground. It rearranges priorities before it rearranges circumstances. You might notice subtle things instead. A reaction that doesn't come as fast as it used to. A memory that doesn't sting as sharply. A moment of calm where there used to be tension. These are signs of real movement, even if they don't look impressive. Another thing to avoid is isolating emotionally under the disguise of needing space. Space can be healthy, but shutting down connection because you feel heavy only deepens the weight. You don't need to explain everything you're feeling, but staying gently connected to life matters. A simple conversation, a walk where you notice the air, a reminder that you exist in a living world, not just inside your head. There's a tendency, after long internal seasons, to harden expectations, to say, "I won't hope until I see proof." That sounds protective, but it quietly starves possibility. Hope doesn't mean naivete. It means staying receptive. It means allowing life to surprise you again. And surprise is essential for renewal. Without it, everything becomes mechanical, predictable, flat. This phase isn't asking you to fix yourself. That's important. You're not broken. You're transitioning. There's a difference. Fixing implies something went wrong. Transitioning implies movement. And movement doesn't always feel smooth. Sometimes it feels awkward, directionless, even dull. But dullness is often just rest without adrenaline. Let your expectations be softer than usual. Let your inner voice be quieter, kinder. If you feel unmotivated, don't shame yourself. Motivation returns after rest, not after pressure. If you feel reflective, don't rush to conclusions. Reflection is only useful when it's paired with compassion. The solstice doesn't demand action. It invites alignment. And alignment happens when you stop fighting where you are, when you stop arguing with the moment, when you let yourself be here without needing it to prove anything yet. What's forming doesn't need your force. It needs your patience. There's a moment in every transition where nothing feels wrong, but nothing feels certain either. That's where you are now. And it can feel unsettling, even if everything looks fine on the outside. This is usually the point where people start second-guessing themselves, not because they made a mistake, but because the old map no longer matches the terrain. When that happens, the instinct is to look backward for guidance, to do what worked before, to think the same way you used to think. But this phase isn't asking you to repeat yourself. It's asking you to listen differently. One of the easiest ways to miss what's trying to emerge is to stay loyal to an old identity out of habit. You might not even realize you're doing it. You tell the same stories about who you are. You react in familiar ways. You keep expecting the same outcomes, not because they feel good, but because they're known. There's comfort in predictability, even when it limits you. New beginnings quietly challenge that comfort. They don't rip it away. They just stop rewarding it. Pay attention to what feels slightly off lately. Not wrong, just misaligned. The conversations that drain you faster than they used to. The goals that don't excite you anymore, even though you worked hard for them. The roles you keep playing out of obligation rather than truth. These aren't failures, they're signals. They're life saying gently, you don't have to carry this forward. Another mistake during this phase is trying to figure everything out. Making lists, forcing clarity, overanalyzing every feeling. But clarity doesn't come from pressure. It comes from space, from letting things surface in their own time. Some answers arrive when you stop interrogating them, when you let your body speak instead of your mind. Tension often releases before understanding does. You might notice an urge to simplify, to cancel plans, to clean, declutter, or withdraw a little. That's not avoidance. That's integration. Your system is shedding excess. Let it. Don't guilt yourself for wanting less noise, less input, less drama. This isn't apathy. It's discernment sharpening. Be careful not to confuse emotional neutrality with emptiness. Feeling calm after intensity can feel strange, even boring, especially if you're used to operating in high emotional contrast. But calm is not the absence of depth. It's the presence of stability. It's a foundation. And foundations aren't exciting to look at, but everything meaningful stands on them. Another subtle trap is waiting for permission to change. Permission from circumstances, from other people, from a future version of yourself who feels braver. But permission doesn't arrive externally. It's internal, and it's often quiet. It sounds like, I'm allowed to want something different now. That sentence alone can shift everything. You don't need to announce your evolution. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to justify why something that once fit no longer does. Growth doesn't require a defense. It requires honesty, mostly with yourself. Let this phase be undefined. Let it be a question mark instead of a conclusion. The pressure to know exactly who you are becoming can actually slow the becoming. Trust the process that's unfolding without demanding it perform on your timeline. Something is reorganizing beneath the surface. You don't need to see it yet. You just need to stop resisting it. There's a quieter layer to this transition that most people never talk about. The part where your outer life hasn't caught up to your inner shift yet. That in-between space can feel lonely, even if you're surrounded by people. You start noticing that certain conversations no longer land the same. Old jokes fall flat. Old worries feel strangely distant, and you might wonder if you're drifting away from life itself. You're not. You're just moving ahead of your environment. This is often when doubt disguises itself as practicality. You tell yourself you're just being realistic now, less hopeful, more grounded. But sometimes that realism is actually fear wearing a reasonable mask. Fear of being disappointed again. Fear of wanting something that doesn't arrive on schedule. So you shrink your expectations. You dim your openness. You decide it's safer not to lean forward. That's another mistake in this season. Safety through contraction eventually becomes confinement. What's required right now isn't bold action. It's internal consistency, saying yes to what feels true, even when it's inconvenient. Saying no to what drains you, even when it's familiar. This doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be subtle. A pause before responding, a boundary you don't announce, you just live. A decision not to argue with yourself anymore. You might feel like you're shedding layers without replacing them yet. That can feel unsettling, like you're less defined than you were before. But definition returns. It always does. It just comes later, after the unnecessary weight falls away. Identity becomes clearer after simplification, not before. There's also a temptation to rush back into productivity, to feel useful again, to fill the space with doing. But doing too soon can lock you into structures that no longer match who you're becoming. Rest isn't laziness here. It's recalibration. It's your internal compass resetting its true north. Pay attention to what feels quietly right, even if it doesn't make logical sense yet. Those subtle pulls matter. They're often drowned out by louder obligations and expectations. But in this phase, subtlety is the signal. The louder something feels, the more likely it's coming from habit or fear. Avoid comparing timelines, especially now. Someone else's momentum has nothing to do with your alignment. Progress looks different in different seasons. Some seasons build visibly, others build capacity. This one is building capacity, emotional capacity, discernment, resilience without hardness. You don't need to explain this phase to anyone. Some people won't understand it anyway, and that's okay. Understanding usually comes after the results, not before. Let yourself be misunderstood for a while if it means staying true to what's forming inside you. What's important is that you don't abandon yourself in the quiet. Don't assume the absence of excitement means the absence of purpose. Some of the most significant inner shifts happen without adrenaline, without urgency, without applause. Stay present, stay gentle, stay honest. The shape of what comes next is forming, even if it hasn't named itself yet. By now, you may be noticing something subtle but undeniable. A slight change in how you respond to things that once pulled you off center. Not perfectly, not all the time, but enough to feel it. That's not accidental. That's integration. And integration is quieter than breakthrough. It doesn't shout, it settles. This is the phase where impatience can sneak back in. You start thinking, okay, I've reflected enough, I've rested enough. When does something happen? But something is happening, just not in the way the mind prefers. The mind likes milestones, checkpoints, proof, but life doesn't always move that way. Sometimes it prepares the container long before it pours anything new into it. Another mistake here is mistaking emotional steadiness for lack of passion. You might not feel as charged or intense as you once did. The highs aren't as high. The lows aren't as dramatic. And that can feel like something is missing. But often, what's missing is chaos, not meaning. Peace can feel unfamiliar when you've lived a long time in reaction mode. Don't sabotage calm just to feel alive again. There's also a quiet grieving that can show up now. Grief for versions of yourself you're outgrowing, for paths you didn't take, for timelines you imagined that never quite materialized. Let that grief move through you without turning it into regret. You're not mourning failure, you're honoring closure. And closure is necessary for forward motion. You may feel less inclined to explain yourself, less interested in defending your choices. That's a sign of internal grounding. When you trust your own process, you don't need external validation as much. This doesn't mean you're disconnected. It means you're rooted. And rooted people don't sway with every opinion that passes by. Be mindful not to reopen doors just because they're familiar. Familiar doesn't mean aligned. Old dynamics can call to you when you're in a neutral space, offering comfort through repetition. But repetition without growth leads to stagnation. Ask yourself quietly, does this move me forward or just keep me occupied? You'll feel the answer before you think it. This stage is about embodiment, letting insights become behavior, letting boundaries become natural instead of forced, letting your nervous system learn that it's safe to operate differently now. That takes time, it takes repetition, and it takes patience with the parts of you that still expect things to fall apart. You don't need to rush closure or clarity. Some things resolve themselves simply because you stopped chasing them. Some answers arrive because you stopped asking the same questions over and over. Trust that what belongs to the next phase will find you when you're ready to hold it. You're not waiting anymore. You're stabilizing. And stability is not a pause before life resumes. It is life reorganized. Eventually, there comes a point where the waiting stops feeling like waiting. Not because everything is clear, but because you're no longer leaning forward in anticipation or backward in regret. You're here, present in a way that doesn't need to announce itself. And that's how you know the transition has done its work. This is where momentum returns, but it's different now. Quieter, more intentional. You don't feel the need to prove anything with it. You act because it feels right, not because you're afraid of falling behind. Movement starts to come from alignment instead of pressure. And when movement comes from alignment, it wastes less energy. It lasts longer. You may notice that certain fears no longer hook into you the way they used to. They still appear, but they don't steer. They don't dictate. They pass through instead of setting up camp. That's not because you've conquered them. It's because you've stopped organizing your life around them. There's a difference. This phase asks for trust, but not blind trust. Grounded trust. The kind that comes from paying attention to your own patterns and noticing that you've survived more than you once thought you could. You don't need guarantees anymore. You've become the stability you were looking for. Be careful not to romanticize the past now. When growth settles in, the mind sometimes looks back with selective memory. It remembers intensity but forgets exhaustion. It remembers connection but forgets cost. You left those chapters for a reason, even if the reason wasn't clear at the time. Let the past stay complete, not bitter, just finished. What's next doesn't require a new personality or a dramatic reinvention. It builds naturally from who you already are when you're not bracing. not performing, not carrying unnecessary weight. This version of you moves cleaner, chooses simpler, knows when to engage and when to step back. There will still be challenges, still unknowns, still moments where you question yourself. That's part of being alive, not a sign you've done something wrong. The difference now is that questioning doesn't collapse you, it sharpens you. It refines your awareness instead of draining it. Let yourself move forward without needing everything to make sense yet. Some clarity only arrives after action. Some confidence only forms after you've taken the step. You don't need to see the entire path, just the next honest move. The solstice opened the door. The days after it taught you how to walk through without forcing. And now, without much noise, without ceremony, you're already on the other side. Not finished, just aligned enough to continue. There's a grounded humility that comes with this phase. You know you don't have everything figured out. And you're okay with that. You've seen how much changes when you stop forcing clarity before it's ready. You've learned that patience isn't passive. It's active trust. And trust, once earned internally, changes how you move through everything. You might notice that you no longer feel the need to chase meaning. Meaning shows up in how present you are, in how honest you're willing to be with yourself, in how you let go of things that once defined you without needing to replace them immediately. Space has become something you value, not fear. This doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. It means you become more resilient without becoming hard. You bend without breaking. You care without overextending. You engage without losing yourself. That balance isn't something you force. It emerges when you stop fighting who you are in this moment. Let what comes next come naturally. You don't need to rush it into form. You've learned that timing has its own intelligence, that some things arrive only when you're quiet enough to receive them without gripping too tightly. Stay open, stay grounded, stay human. This chapter doesn't end with a conclusion. It ends with continuity, with you still moving, still learning, still adjusting, not chasing light, not fearing darkness, just walking forward with enough awareness to recognize yourself along the way. That's enough.